Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thursday Night Live with Bill Tucci.
Behold his mighty hand.
Tucci gang, Tucci gang, Tucci gang, Tucci gang, Tucci gang, Tucci gang, Tucci gang.
Just want to manage expectations.
Weird.
This is the worst.
The bell.
Hello, my friends.
Did you like that? I was like, what? The bell. The bell.
JC Vaugn, 2 nights in a row.
Two nights in a row, man.
Pretty cool, man. I love having Thursday Night Live with Bill Tucci back again. Love it.
Especially 2 nights a week.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. 8 days. Well, when you have 8 days a week, why not? So,
Just
you guys
a
good?
bunch of bald guys.
Got a great show tonight.
Great show.
Great show. Jeff, would you like to make the introduction to our esteemed colleague and guest?
I would love to, Billy. How about you, Nile? Can I go ahead?
Yeah, go right on. Come
All
on,
right.
bring the energy, people. Bring the energy. Let's
am
do this.
very excited to introduce tonight's guest, the former publisher of DC Comics, a writer, an editor, a TV guy, a cartoon animation guy, and so many other things, even a novelist.
Man
Mr.
about
Dan
town.
DiDio.
Oh, man.
Hey, what's up?
Good. You know what? This was the first time I ever saw that introduction, Billy, and I have to admit, with all the crazy images, the one that sticks with me and probably haunts me the most is you smoking a pipe.
Yes, I do smoke a pipe. See?
You smoke a pipe. Okay, that's very nice. It brings a distinguished air to this group you brought to. You should do more
Debbie
of
says it looks like I should be blowing bubbles out of it. So, I brought my pipe. San Diego, we usually smoke our pipes in San Diego on Saturday evening. We go out for a Greek night. My buddy Steve Perro's put together. It's over 20 years now, right, Jeff?
It is over 20 years.
Yep. And we go. It's a men's night. No women allowed. No goyles. No skirts, if you will. And we have Greek food, and then we just sit around and lie to each other and smoke cigars and pipes and drink a lot of ouzo and whiskey. It's great.
There you go.
It's a great night. That's
A lot of handshakes.
serving my Saturday night for that every year. But Dan, my friend, how have you been?
Good, thanks. Good. Been running around a little crazy, but it's been a lot of fun. I've been doing a lot of different things, which have been keeping me busy, which is kind of fun. I've been in this what I call the semi-retirement mode for a while, but I just don't really know what it means or how to do it right. So I keep on taking on more things to do along the way. And as you said, we're going to sit here and talk about Defense of the Earth. Got that running. We got the Svengoolie book. That's kind of fun. That's been exciting. That's been a great time. And actually, at the end of the month, the weird thing is I've got I got a Nightwing story coming up in the DC Halloween special, which was
cool.
Kind of fun. Yeah. It's first work I'm doing over there in about 4 years. So that was an interesting. That was a fun phone call. And when they asked me if I wanted to do a Nightwing story, I actually I let out a very audible laugh and said, "You got me at Nightwing," needless to say. And then turned it in pretty quickly. We had a lot of fun. Good people working with it.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. I love like those short stories and in the anthology books and all. And thank you, Dan. My last Eisner I was nominated for was for the Batman trick for the Scarecrow in
wow.
One of the DC Halloween stories. You don't even remember, but you gave me the job, so thank you.
Okay.
I written through. So
no.
That was
I'm a huge anthology fan. I've always been an anthology fan. I think anthology is what got me into comics, between things like House of Secrets, House of Mysteries, Where Monsters Dwell, stuff like that, and Twilight Zones and everything that I could grab anthology wise. I loved. I love writing short stories. I feel that it really hones your ability to be a writer. If you can write something concise, beginning, middle, and end, and develop a story, a message, a clear through line in 8 to 11 pages, I think that really helps you build your skills and talent so that as you expand out, you can grow the story, grow the number of characters. But you need to be able to tell that complete thought in a very concise period in order to really be able to get the skill to grow past that.
It's absolutely the case. Billy and I were talking about this last night, and this will pass for my name drop for the evening. I was having dinner with Will Eisner, and he said to me, if you can do an 8-page story, you can do a 28-page story.
Yeah.
The opposite isn't necessarily true.
Absolutely. Yep.
And Dan, I get the whole anthology thing in a bigger sense, like Marvel's superhero holiday grab bag treasury editions in 74 and 75.
Yeah.
The Nick Fury story in there, I loved it so much I had to have the issue. It became my first mail order comic.
No.
But the only work I ever did for DC was because you got me in a Christmas issue.
I love the Christmas issue.
I thought it was great. I loved it.
And also, those things too, in the day, and what they should be too, is a lot of tryout material too. It really should be trying out new talent, giving people opportunity. You're selling off the holiday, you're selling off the characters, so the names inside the book shouldn't have the same weight. You should be able to really get a chance and give people a chance. I mean, all these guys, you hear the stories, I get, while I was working with Frank Miller, he tells the story about how he gets started in anthologies and things like that. And you talk to all these guys that came up in the 70s, they cut their teeth on these short stories. They didn't get a series right away. They had to prove their worth in these small little bites.
Yeah, I look at like my pal Alex Saviuk. I knew him from the backup stories he did first.
Yeah.
Before he ever was a Web of Spider-Man guy.
Right.
Nice.
Alex is a good guy.
Yeah,
Hell of
he
a
is.
talker.
Yep.
He's a
Yep.
chatter.
Yeah, you gave me 4 stories, I think, short stories. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So in those specials, they were fun.
I love the one that Billy the Flash Superman race one, man.
Yeah.
That was.
I'll be honest, Billy, man, it's a blur.
I bet. Oh, I bet, man. I bet. Well, I'm thanking you for it now. Thank you.
I usually want people tell me these stories all the time, and I'm like, I don't remember shit.
I think every job I got at DC, you and I were, and everybody were hanging out at the bar or dinner. And you're like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, the classic story with that one is with Palmiotti, with Jimmy. We were at a retailer show, and I was lamenting the fact that DC didn't have a Deadpool, and I said, Lobo's not Deadpool, Ambush Bug's not Deadpool. I don't know who's our Deadpool, and it was Phil Boyle who recommended. He goes, who's your Deadpool? And I said, who? He goes, Harley Quinn, and I'm like, Harley Quinn. Now I'm going to admit a couple of things. Number one, never watched the Batman animated series. Never. I was working at ABC Children's at the time. It was the opposition. It was my competition. And it was kicking our ass, and I just never watched it. I worried about our own shows. So I never really got into the Batman animated series. So I never really was exposed to Harley Quinn as a character. When I started at DC, Harley Quinn book was rather dour and a dark book. So that's how I was first introduced to the character, was through the DC book at the time. And it was very heavy, very noir at the time that book was coming out. So I never saw her as a bright, noisy, loud character. And so Jimmy had come to meet me in Florida. We were going to go out to dinner after the retailer day, and he stayed next to me. I just turned to him and said, hey, you know anything about Harley Quinn? And he goes, yeah, let me me and Mando, let's see if we can knock something out for you. And I said, okay, great. And turns into a juggernaut for DC just because of that brief conversation.
And I mean, what a pairing too, because they really transformed that character. Because remember, from the early days, you say dark, and she was like an abused spouse.
Yeah.
And now look at her; she's holy shit,
powerhouse.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
$1 industry.
Yeah. I think they're the ones that really unleashed her potential. I really do.
Well, Dan, I just want to say good for you and 3 cheers for you for hiring them.
Yeah. We got a great super chat for you here too. It says, Dan, thank you for being here. Wish you were still running DC. Your management is needed, sir. 200 watts studio. Thank you.
It's funny. People say that all the time, and it's very gracious they say that. But the reality is, you know, when you're working with the same characters for a long period of time, you got a shelf life, dude. You know, because ultimately there's only so much you can do with these characters, and you can change them so much, but you got to return them as what they were. And there's a lot of ways to do it. And, you know, everybody should be trying something different. That was my job. When I came in, how to do something different, how to shake it up, how to make it. And then it was time to do that again, you know, because you sort of get in a mindset that ultimately, you know, it might help a fresh set of eyes every once in a while to come through. So I'm, you know, I hope for everybody that they can get things going, and, you know, who knows, but you know, I like I tell everybody, I have my time. I'm good.
Yeah. And now you're working on some really cool projects, though. I mean, you've really dove into a bunch of different things. You've got, you know, a great book out right now with, you know, Defenders of the Earth, which, as for me, I grew up with that cartoon. So to see it kind of like continuing on in comic book form is pretty awesome. And then obviously the stuff going on with Svengoolie is pretty cool. So you really kind of went in some really cool directions, you know, now that you're doing your own thing.
Well, you know, it's kind of fun. You get to, you know, it's, you know, there's a certain mindset that comes with not having to do anything. And I'm going to say that when you don't have to do anything, you can be very judicious about what you do pick to choose to do. So what was fun is that I'm just looking for things that I enjoy, you know, that I have fun doing, the things that I like, you know, because Defense of the Earth was a fun assignment, you know, and I just got it by accident again. I was having a conversation with Mike Martz, and he sort of threw this chum in the water with Defense of the Earth, and I just could not stop going back to him and asking him questions about it. And then ultimately, you know, I got the assignment, and I was familiar with the animated series. I remembered it just because, again, I was working in animation and I was familiar with other projects that were going on around me. But when I did a whole breakdown, I did a whole layout of the story arc for 8 issues. I had it fully worked out. And then I went back and actually watched the animated series, all 65 episodes. And lo and behold, a lot of the things that I put in my outline were in the series in a way that lined them up so nicely to the point that I felt like it was a natural extension of the show, or representation of the show, without having to be a reinvention, which is what I didn't want to do. You know, I had never worked on characters like Phantom or Flash Gordon or the Mandrake before. So working them on the first time is what I really wanted to do, and get an opportunity to have some fun and play with them as people know them to be, and really play to their strengths rather than trying to make them something else. It was easy to move the series forward with them, having a blast. Mandrake of all characters is the one that he's starting to become my lead in a very weird way, because he's just so much fun. You know, and ironically, I was a big Defenders fan, Marvel's Defenders, and I'm almost playing them as my version of that Defenders.
Nice.
And Jim Calafiore did a great job on the interiors and everything.
Yeah, it's been a blast, and you know, I did a little work with Jim while I was over with Frank Miller Presents. He did 2 of the one-shots for me, so we were familiar with our working style together. So when they recommended Jim, I was all over it. I was fully supportive, and it's been great.
Yeah. When you went back to watch all 65 episodes, how was it? Because after I read your issue, right, I was feeling nostalgic. Yeah, and of course, I've got my massive multi-terabyte server with all my animation, and I'm watching it. I'm enjoying it, but some of it I'm like, it didn't hold up too well. But it was a little painful going back.
You know, nothing ever holds up the way you remember it. That's what I always say. Nothing ever does. And for that show, I was looking at it for a couple of different reasons. I like the fact that it was Marvel Studios that did the development on the series. I thought that was interesting. I think it had an interesting start. You go back to that first episode, and they kill Dale in the first episode of the series, which is, if you think about it, highly dramatic for a kids show. You know, they don't say she's dead. They don't say she's been killed, but it's clear she's dead, and they're moving on past her. And so that's an interesting way to kick it off. I thought what was really interesting, I think they did like 2 drunk driving episodes, or dealing with teenage drinking, which, again, they were trying different things. They might not have succeeded in places, might not hold up well, but I appreciate the effort that was during that period of time, because I can contextualize what they were going with and what they were competing against in that market at that time. And they were trying to do something slightly different, a little bit older, a little more mature. And, you know, you have to recognize and appreciate what they were trying to accomplish, given the confines of what they were working in broadcast television.
Yeah. And fun fact is Jim Valentino was a major storyboard artist for that series.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really?
I only know because he commented on my post when I told everyone to read the first issue. He's like, "Oh, I was the storyboard artist for that."
Wow, crazy.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I had no clue.
That is really cool. And Nile, I didn't know that either until I saw that post.
Right.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. Why don't you pop up the cover for the first issue, which is on sale now? I think it's been out for about 2 weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, about 2 weeks. Yeah, the second issue comes out. I have this weird little 2-week period. The second issue of Defenders and the DC Halloween special come out on the same day in the last week of September. And then the week after that is when the Svengoolie special comes out. So I've got 3 books with fingerprints on it over a 2-week period, which is nice. which is I think a first for me, which is kind of nice. Yeah,
that's a lot of stuff coming out.
That's pretty cool. So when you were talking to Mike Martz, so of course you knew from his tenure at DC. When you were talking to him, was he just bouncing ideas off of you, or was he fishing for you to do this all along?
I don't know. Actually, I went over looking. I just went over to say hi because I consider Mike a friend and just one of the real good guys in comics. And I went over to say hello to him, and the conversation started going. And I have absolutely no recollection of how the conversation started. All I know is that I left with a bee in my ear that I couldn't go. And the joke was I kept on walking away from his booth, walk around the floor, then I come back, pitch him again, and walk away, come back again, pitch him again. And of course, by the third trip back, he was laughing at me, which was probably well deserved too, I guess.
That's really cool. So is there, presuming this does well enough for Mad Cave, is there any interest from them in doing more, or you just wait and see?
I'd be more, it's one of the things that's interesting to me, because I always take on this challenge, and I always feel it's hard to say. I always feel like, oh, why did I bother doing that? There's 2 things. You can have your single character book, or you have a team book. Okay. And I always somehow wind up on a team book. And when I do a team book, you're always pressed for pages. You have a number of characters. Yeah. You're always pressed for pages. You want to get a point across. You want to get development across. But you also, I have that where I want to service or I want to reflect every character in the book. I don't want books to go without characters represented or having something to say or do that's unique to who they are. I'm very big about having a beat or a moment that's identifiable to a single character, so you know who he is, not just through his words, but through the actions he's going through in that story. And I always take that on. I always feel like I'm short selling myself because I'm always feeling rushed, always feeling crammed in storytelling. But I love the ensemble. I just love the ensemble. And I always want to take that opportunity. With a single character book, you get a chance to open that up and breathe. You see, especially in today's world where stories are decompressed or they're very linear. In a linear story, it's much easier to take a single character through all the actions from page 1 to page 22 or page 24 straight through. But when you're using multiple characters, you're constantly looking for ways to cut away, to change scenes, to move around, to keep the action going. I'm more familiar with that because that's much more the style I used to work in animation. So I bring that today. But in today's world, they like that long, drawn out linear story. There's a couple of books I was looking at on the shelf, and there was one book that came out. It was actually a very big seller where there was a 6-page sequence with almost no dialogue and a person sitting locked in a room. And I couldn't understand the attraction of that as a comic book story. Just couldn't understand it. And it's just not in me to do these dead scenes. I'm unfortunately the guy that when there's 5 people in a room and there's nobody talking, I'm the guy that always has to talk just to break the silence. And I can't look at a page of a comic that is silent for so long without feeling the need that somebody has to say something or interact with something to make the action happen.
Where we see this in TV, you see a lot of scenes with a long shot pulling into a medium shot and maybe even a close-up where the person is staring out the window or posing. And I Rosina and I always are talking like, yeah, they just stand around doing this.
Listen, I think every TV show is tedious these days. I think every show can use a good editor. I think every scene could be shortened to Titans, and the amount of repetition in scenes is exhausting. I believe television is created now for people to consume TV while being on a device. You're on your phone, you're on your iPad, in front of the TV. Something happens, you look up, you replay it, then you go back to your iPad and go from there. That's it. I like things that hold my attention. I want to watch one thing one time, and maybe that makes me a little bit of a dinosaur, but that's okay. It's all right.
That's okay too.
I'm good with it.
Absolutely. So Nile, I want to ask you, as the Defenders of the Earth fan,
yes,
how do you think this issue came?
I really didn't want to do this to you, Dan, live on the air, but
go ahead.
No, it was great. I freaking posted about it. Come on.
Yeah, I know.
I thought it was really good. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I remember the series. I was talking to our buddy Brian Blevins. He's a huge fan as well. And I was like, "Have you read it?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "This really worked really well because if you remember how the whole animated series played out, this went along perfectly." And then I remember being like, "Man, I bet you had to rewatch all those episodes."
Yeah,
and I started doing it myself. I think I'm like halfway through. Like every night, I watch a couple and then something else. But or I got them playing while I'm working. But I think it did really well. And what I love about it too, though, you're dealing with like Flash Gordon and the Phantom and Mandrake, and like you're dealing with characters that really aren't top of the discussion anymore, right? They're not like what's going on. So I'm really kind of hoping this revamps it, and maybe this can kind of be like a gateway for maybe yourself or other writers to start playing with some more of these characters that time is kind of forgetting.
The fun thing I did before working on this book, I actually worked with the people at Condé Nast and did a book on Street and Smith pulp characters, and we did the history of Street and Smith. So I really had to do a deep dive into Street and Smith and learn about all the characters, not just the Flash and Doc Savage, but all these crazy characters, Skipper, the Whistler, the Whisperer, whatever they are. I mean, it was insane and so much fun because they were so quirky. And that's the fun part, is that when you don't have people with powers, you have to really bring out the quirkiness of their personalities and their attitudes to really make them come alive. And I think that's a great challenge. And if you could bring that sensibility across, it was fun. I mean, for me, the challenge really is Flash Gordon's a science fiction theme. Phantom is urban or jungle adventure. Mandrake is, magic or could be fantasy. 3 completely different tones. They have no reason to be in a room together, honestly. Right. And that's the fun part. And, they found the hook in the show, which was Ming, and it was really a Flash-driven show. And for me, it's making it about all of them. I want it so that each of the characters has a beat or sensibility that drives the team together. And like I said, it goes back to other team books where there's always that one villain that a hero had a hard time beating on his own. So now I got a team to beat the one character I came against because my villain is so formidable. I need this help. And that's the fun part. A lot of this, believe it or not, I not just from reading comics, but I used to spend a lot of time talking team books and characters with Len Wein during the days when we were working together during my time in animation, working on when I was story editor for Reboot and then co-story editor with Len on War Planets. We spent a lot of time talking about this and understanding the formulas of bringing together the dynamics. And the trick of a team book is to work out the interactions and the personal interactions of the characters in the middle of action beats. And I love stuff like that they're arguing about things that seem inconsequential set against the threat they're fighting, yet both seem have equal importance in the discussion. And if you can bring that and elevate the story in that fashion, then you're really bringing it home. But the fun part about this is that since there's a Flash book and there's a Flash quarterly, I'm really focused more, and I push Flash to the background on purpose for the first 3 issues to allow the other characters to shine. And Flash is more represented in that book by his son than by himself. The one that's going through the emotional turmoil at the moment in the early issues is going to be his son as he's trying to deal with a number of issues, and he feels he can't confront them with his father. He has to work it out on his own. And then ultimately when those two come together, that's when the story really takes off.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for and Nile, and you and Billy jump in on this too. Obviously, when we start talking about bringing the characters to the forefront again, in regard to the Phantom, we're really only talking about in America, because the Phantom is still very popular around the world.
Yeah.
So what I don't know is that true for Flash and Mandrake?
I think for Flash, I would say there's still I would say for the Phantom and Flash, definitely there's still a lot of that. Even here in the US, if you want to, you want to call it that, there's definitely those hardcore groups. Now, Mandrake is not one most people talk about, but I could be wrong. There might be a special like Mandrake, dinner club out there.
That's the perfect way to watch Mandrake.
Hey, hang on.
That's it. Get the pipe. I feel like I need a pipe talking about Mandrake right now.
Yeah. And I love what you did with him in the first issue. In the direction he's going.
I honestly, I adore that character. He's a blast because I want to play him as a real showman, as a magician, and so he plays all the things. And there's a couple of things that he really leans into the magic part and plays the magic in a very mysterious way, but an entertaining way simultaneously. The fun one is, I'm going to spoil one thing though. I'm going to have to spoil something, so I will. What we build up to is there's a confrontation between our Phantom and what I call the Council of Phantoms. And if you go and you do your research, you'll find out that the Phantom in the series, in the Defenders of the Earth series, is marked as the 27th Phantom. And ultimately, because of his actions and behaviors in the story, he gets called in front of the Council of Phantoms. And Jim has drawn this incredible double-page spread of 26 Phantoms judging our Phantom, standing in judgment in front of all those Phantoms. And that's part of a key moment within the series when he has to stand his ground against all those who preceded him. So
I want to ask a question. I want to ask a question about Jim. I recall commenting to you and actually to Jim at a convention that I thought something really clicked with your work with him on Ancient Enemies.
Yeah.
I thought you guys must have been. It's either came off that way, or you guys were like truly simpatico on what you were trying to do in that, because those issues were great.
He actually changed his style a bit for those. He wanted to try something a little different, and I wanted to push him in that direction as much as I could. I wanted something that felt a different tone, a little more scratchy, a little more edgy, a little more something. And he brought it in spades on that the Wraith and Son book. I love that to death.
Yeah,
great.
It was genuinely a surprise, and I've been following his work for years. And I was blown away by it, and in a most pleasant way, because I always liked his work.
Yeah.
But it's neat when you see somebody really elevate.
Yeah, no, that's the fun part. It's one of the great things about now for me is you really get a chance to work with people you enjoy working with. You know what I mean? And that's something, and it brings a peace, it brings an enjoyment. You still have the pressure of getting the book done. You still have the insecurity of the things that you write or create. You still have you're still filled with doubt, but you have that level of comfort that you're around people that you trust and believe in. And that makes it a much better situation overall. And honestly, when you're trying to do things like that and you're trying to justify the reasons why you're doing things, I think that plays into more than I ever imagined, at least this point in my career.
Yeah. Does it make it easier for the creative process when you're feeling like your environment's that much better?
Yeah, it does. I have a weird creative process. I walk 5 miles every morning. And
Lazy.
I sit there and I record. When you think you're brilliant and you're recording yourself, thinking you're coming up with all these gems, and you play them back, and it's all crap. But it's a great way to get things out of my system. It gets way to get the ball rolling, and it's been fun because now I'm at that point now where we're just working on the outlines and the dialogue, the script and the dialogue, and I know when the layouts come in, they're perfectly great, and I don't have to worry about that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I learned not to be particular from Keith Giffen. And to trust the artist. It's the artist medium, and that's the bottom line. They're the guys, selling the books. So you want to make sure that they're having fun and that their strength of their art is on the page. And that, it was funny when I used to work with certain artists or listen to artists talking about how they work. And I don't know if Billy, if this is your way or not when you're working for somebody else's script, but I know a couple of artists that like to draw all the fun pages first. They go through the script and they draw the fun pages first because it gets them enthused about the book instead of slogging through people talking at a coffee table, sipping coffee for 8 pages, And they want to draw those double page spreads. They want those pinups. They want that. And you have to be aware of what an artist likes. And you got to make sure you put something in there that they're going to have fun drawing, And that's essential to me because you want them to have that level of engagement in the material. And so every time I'm doing it, I want to make sure there's something exciting inside that book to get them excited about drawing it instead of, oh my God, do I got to draw this guy sharpening a pencil, And, I'm sure it's a very important pencil, but, it's still a guy sharpening a pencil.
I usually go from page 1 on, personally. That's my own thing. But with you, with these great characters, like say with the Phantom, did you look back at the old, do you have collections of the old King features going back to the Sundays and things like that? And did you I gotta, revisit it and get into it again, since get it really super fresh in your memory and all?
The funny part as a New Yorker, growing up in New York, Mandrake, the Phantom, Flash Gordon were not in any of our newspapers.
Right.
Not in my news. We had Prince Valiant, we had a couple other things, but we never had any of those 3 characters. So I never had that high level of exposure. So my exposure to these characters was DC Comics in the 80s and the animation in the 90s. That was my exposure. And then I picked up a couple of trades along the way now. But the reality is I didn't really go and read the comics because, it's funny when you go back and you read some of these older stories, they're very much a period of time. And there's not much you could glean out of them that you can use for storytelling. They work as standalone stories for a fan of the series, but unless there's a definitive volume, which I don't think there is that I know of, it was hard for me to pick out what was important and not. So I had to, basically I was cobbling my information from the few books I had, from the animation I saw, from what I read on Wikipedia or some of the outlets or some of the other fan sites. And then I just did my homework. I looked for things that what I do is I look for things that people are excited about, that they post about, and do a little more research about that, because I figure if somebody's excited enough about to talk about it, there must be value behind it. And if there's value behind it, maybe I can bring it into the book in some way, shape, or form,
Oh, we got
that makes sense.
We got a super chat here for you again, Dan. It's from Paul Taylor. Thank you, sir. Wow, Dan DiDio, you're really getting the top-notch guests. Who were your favorite artists and writers to work with over the years, Dan? Was there a favorite character you had?
That's always a tough question because you enjoy working with everyone, and I'm always looking for new people to work with. And there are my personal favorites, like people I'm friends with. People I miss the most.
New people.
Like Keith. Keith has always been I considered not just somebody as a great collaborator, but a great friend as well. And I love guys like that. The guy. I grew up on. So I grew up, my 6 writers growing up on. I grew up on, Roy Thomas, Jerry Conway, Steve Englehart, Steve Gerber, Len Wein, Marv Wolfman. Those are my guys. Those are the guys I grew up on. I got a chance to work with almost every single one of them. Okay. That was a mission of mine, to work with them, all of them. Probably the most 2 influential ones as writers to me was Steve Englehart and Steve Gerber. I probably found them to be the most interesting writers as in my, what I would call younger years, formative years, the things that I was trying to glean out of other people's work. So that was a blast. When I started at DC, I had my version of the hub, which was Jeff Johns, Judd Winnick, Greg Rucka. Those were my guys. Then Grant Morrison came in, another one. Those are the guys that did all the heavy lifting, and made me look good. And then you got guys like Brett Meltzer and all these other people you bring in that just brought a sheen to everything we had going on. Those are my early days at DC, and then art wise, there's just too many to name. You know, my goal was to, keep, goal was always that the books have got to be exciting as possible. I mean, I always refer to Jim as the guy that got things going for me personally at DC. This is before, while he's still at Wildstorm, and with Hush. And I tell the story about Hush. And so this is my story. So when Jim and Jeff Loeb were doing Hush, it was supposed to be a standalone miniseries, much in the like of Long Halloween. It was supposed to be off to the side. And Jim, to his credit, said, I want to be the Batman artist. I want to be the main artist on Batman. And in those days, nobody relaunched books. And they weren't going to relaunch Batman for Jim Lee the same way they relaunched X-Men for him at Marvel. So the conversation went, if you're going to be the Batman artist, you're not going to get a number 1. You're going to get a number 608. Are you comfortable with that? And I think, I might be paraphrasing, but I think Jim's words were simply, it might be 608, but I'm going to sell it like it's the number 1. And he made being on the regular books cool again, where everybody was so busy wanting to do prestige format here, hardcover there, special paper here. He said, nope, let's do it on the main book. And Jim goes to Batman, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to be on the main books again. And that was the moment I knew we had a chance at DC, because ultimately we made the other material less important and the main line the main focus again. And that was my goal, was to make the main line.
I think that's a really good approach. Everything's cyclical. You need the specials. You need stuff like that to get attention. And there's people you're not going to get on a monthly, that kind of stuff. Totally understandable. But you talk to somebody, okay, my age, and you're basically, you say Thor 337. That's Walter. Say Daredevil 158. That's Frank. We didn't need a lot of number 1s like that. And I thought that is a very good point you just made about Batman 608. Everybody knows what that book is.
Exactly. And that moment. Mm-hmm. And the other part of the question was my favorite characters. My favorite characters are the Metal Men. They always were. I had them in development in animation at ABC. I was working with Jeanette Kahn and Louise Simonson, and we were going to work that as an animated series. And it was on my schedule up until Disney bought ABC, or else there would have been on ABC a Metal Men Thunder Agents hour block.
That would have been cool.
We lost because of Disney buying ABC, so that never happened.
You mentioned Metal Men. I think you got to mention Garcia Lopez.
Yeah. Well, I got pulled into Wednesday Comics because somebody dropped out the last minute, and I was working with one artist, and it didn't click, and I was about to dump off, and because the artist wasn't available anymore, and then they offered me Garcia Lopez, and I almost died of working with Garcia Lopez on the Metal Men for Wednesday Comics. I was so excited I wanted to buy a page of his. I knew I wanted to buy it, but I wanted him to finish the book. And when he finally finished the 13th page, I called him up immediately. I said, Jose, I'd like to buy one of your pages. He goes, Dan, I already sold them all. They're pre-sold.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
I missed out
on my Garcia Lopez. But I wound up doing the series again myself, and I knew that was the end. I knew I was near the end of my time at DC. I when you can smell it, it's coming to a close. And I wanted to do Metal Men desperately, and we had launched it several times, and it never met my expectations because, as you would with your favorite character, you have very high expectations for it. And there was one team that was developing it at the time, and I replaced the team, and I took over the book myself. I understand that people were upset with me, and rightfully so. But that's the only time I ever. It was extenuating circumstances, so for whoever you know who you are, I apologize. But I desperately wanted to do that book before I left, and I'm glad I got a chance to do it. They are absolutely my favorite characters.
So let's talk about another favorite character of yours.
Okay.
How did you end up doing? Now, I remember that there's some Svengoolie stuff at DC.
Yeah.
How did this whole process start?
It's so crazy. It's basically we're at C2E2. My wife's with me. She knows I'm a Svengoolie fan. He's signing. I'm online. I'm waiting online with everybody else to get a signature as his at the line. The producer walking the line, and I was just wound up chatting with the producer, and ultimately he figures that I'm with DC, and we're just chatting and all that. By the time I get to to the front of the line with Svengoolie. I find out Svengoolie's a big comic book fan. So we just hit it off and just became friendly on it. I stayed in touch with him, got a chance to go to the studio, got a chance to stand in the coffin. I had a blast. The only thing I haven't gotten to do is be the hand behind the door talking or throw a chicken. And that's it. Then I'm set. But anyway, long story short, we Matt Keller, who is one of the marketing gurus at DC, knew my love of Svengoolie and wound up unknowns to me, working out a deal with MeTV to do a special giveaway comic for trade on-air trade and things like that. So we wound up doing the Svengoolie comic at DC, and we had a blast. So much so that when I got to Frank Miller Presents, the Rich, who is Svengoolie, called me up. He said, "We're being approached by some companies to do comics. Can you give me a recommendation?" And I said, "No recommendations. I'm doing it. I would be angry if you did it with anybody but me." And so wound up doing the deal. You know, Frank wasn't happy about it. What didn't really fit the tonality of what Frank Miller Presents was, but you know, he gave me that one. And I wound up doing the book with those guys. We had a great time. And then when Frank Miller Presents sort of came apart, I knew we had to do a second one. So that's when I reached out to you at Gemstone, and we found out another way to get this book done, which was great.
Hey, Nile, if you want to scroll down on that a little bit, that page, was that you that just put that up, or Billy? Scroll down on that page a little, and you can click on the number 1 there. Oh no, click on the show variants. See if that works. There you go. And so one of the great things about this book is I think it really captures the spirit of the show. It's silly, it's fun, but it's not insulting. It's not stupid. And you got some great art on that issue.
Oh, the first one we had Art Balthazar, we had Christopher Jones doing the main hub. We had Jill Thompson in there, had a little Bill Morrison in there. We had a blast. But on the second book, the new book, I had to fight the urge to go back and sit with that same crew again. And actually, but Bill had only done 2 pages, so I reached out to Bill. So we got Bill and Scott Shaw, both big fans of the show, to do the main story. And then we had the team, the writing team from the show actually writes the lead story in the second special, which is great about it. And then the individual talents, the ones who play Nostalgia Veratu and Svengoolie and Imp, those characters that now appear on the show, each one of them wrote their own 4-page story within the body of the special too. So we have the writing done by all the people who write the show and the characters, which just brings that authentic.
And it really has that vibe. Now, can we show the covers for the new one?
For the new one, yeah.
Yeah, let's show.
First up, cover A is Bill Morrison.
Yeah,
and I just love this one.
He does great work, Bill.
It's so funny because Bill came up with the cover and everybody loved it so much, and so much so that the story was already written. And Rich goes, "I love that cover. Can I write this beat into the story?" I said, "Script's locked, buddy. We got to move. I got people drawing right now." But he wanted to go back and rewrite the script because he loved the cover that came in. I think it just captures everything about the show.
And Bill's a guy who is capable of so many different styles. And all of them good.
Yeah.
You know, just absolutely amazing. So, and then Scott Shaw did cover B.
Yeah, and there's other new characters that are in the story. He's drawn some of them in the background there, and they really wrote this story to Scott's strengths as well, because he brings in this really eclectic mix of monsters, and Scott just designed the heck out of them and really brought them to life too. So between the two of them, I think the story flows really nicely, and it really comes together with the 2 different styles, but really works the story. There's a real clear break in it. And then what happens is that, like I said, we've got 3 backup stories written by the 3 other cast members from the series, from the show, and each one of them has its own artist. We've got Joe Staten on board, we got Dan Parent on board, and we have a new artist, a guy of Liam MG he's called, is his last name, and really great looks. And I just thought the whole package came together better than we imagined. The people at MeTV loved it, and I couldn't be more happy with the way they came together.
So from my perspective, as the Gemstone guy who is fortunate enough to publish this second one, the cool thing for me was I liked the first one so much I was pestering you to make sure that we got all the variants to get them in the price guide.
Yeah.
And I wrote a review of it because I just loved it so much. And so when you ended up bringing this to Gemstone, to me, it's just like, okay, totally cool. And it, for anybody who liked the first one, it's going to feel the same physically. Same paper, same nice cover stock, all that kind of stuff like that. And I think it's a really great companion piece to the first one.
Yeah. For the retailers, it's interesting because it's not your traditional comic audience coming to get there. The Svengoolie fans are legion. They have a huge fan base. They have this incredible marketing machine behind it, merchandise machine behind it, and people are constantly going out and buying the merchandise and all that. So when material comes out with anything on it, they go looking for it. They go hunting it down. So I'm hoping that, when they go to the stores, they find them,
I mean, to me, the greatest thing we can do for the business that we love is get new people into comic shops, get them in there. They'll discover something else they like. And the Svengoolie thing. And I think part of the title is 45th anniversary.
Yeah. So
this is sort of amazing. In an era where we tend to think of the horror hosts that we grew up with as sort of a nostalgia act, this thing is flourishing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and he's still going strong. I mean, it literally been 45 years on the air, which is an incredible feat, honestly. And to still have that sense of loyalty. And honestly, you have to see him in Chicago. It's just a monster.
Talk a little bit about the signings you had. Talk a little bit about the signings you had there for the first book.
Yeah, we did a couple of signings. We did one with the Graham Crackers in the downtown area. Then we did one. Art Balthazar store, Oh Yeah Comics, and we had a line out the door, and it was crazy. And Rich really loves the fans. He loves to interact with them, And it's just a feel good thing. I think people really just enjoy the moment, and I think it's reciprocal. He enjoys it just as much as they do, and I think this is why it has that special connection with his fan base.
The one thing I want to say is, for anybody who has not ordered this yet, it's not too late. Monday is what's called final order cutoff. So you've got between now and Monday to go to your retailer and tell them you want these comics.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fun. It's good. We had a blast, and like I said, this is where the joy is all about, and the things that are keeping going. I mean, and that's the stuff that I'm doing now. I just talking to you guys right before we came on. I just got back from Vancouver. I participated in the 30th anniversary documentary for a show I worked on 30 years ago called Reboot, which was the first computer animated TV series.
Remember that?
And it was interesting to be sitting with people excited about the show that were younger than the show.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, man.
There's something odd about that. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I know you weren't watching this before you were born.
When we get to those cultural touchstones like that, where somebody is a fan of something that is older than them, it's an amazing thing. I have a friend who's in the next year's Karate Kid movie, and her kids, who are not old enough to remember the original, love the original.
Right.
And I just think, how cool is that kind of stuff happens.
And that's the interesting thing, with the reinvention of characters, the reinvention of concepts, done right, you can create a whole new generation if you don't wallow too much in the nostalgia aspect, but fully extract what you love about it and find a way to put a new veneer on it.
Nostalgia can be the initial impulse. It can't be the story. Yeah.
But reboot holds up well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody in that room cringe when they watch it in a weird way, not because of the show, but because how rudimentary some of the stuff is compared to animation today. But the storytelling and the characters overwhelm that sensibility. You know what I mean? It overtakes it, because you can look at it and they look at the fundamentals. That was all keyframe animation. It It was before motion capture. So they're actually animators doing all the motions and things on the computer rather than trapping those motions and then moving them onto the character itself. So it was a fascinating time for me because, and I can't talk enough about the guys that started the company. The person who started the company, Ian Pearson, along with Gavin Blair and then ultimately Phil Mitchell, but Ian and Gavin, they did the Money for Nothing Dire Straits music video.
No kidding.
First computer animated characters that gave them the impetus to go out and say we can do a whole show on this rather than just do just this in little sound bites or background on something else. And it was groundbreaking. And even when I was at Mainframe, we were out there selling computer animation to a world that only understood 2D animation. And the only thing that we could compare it to was things like Toy Story or Ants, which were multi-million-dollar movies, for film, not for TV. And we really had to carve some new territory. And there's a lot of good and a lot of bad, but seeing it still standing there 30 years later and celebrating 30 years later makes you feel like it was all worthwhile. And then you look at the marketplace where it is almost all CG. You knew you were right in what you were trying to do because this is where it all went. Yeah,
and that show was even before Toy Story. It was like
a
year before it.
Yeah, they started it, and the funny part is the comic connection to Reboot is an interesting one. The first designer on there was Ian Gibson, and then Ian was then replaced by Brendan McCarthy, two very popular 2000 AD artists, and then the third designer was Dean Ormston, who was another incredible, So they had a lot of comic sensibilities, and when we used to work on the show, we used to use comic book talk as our shorthand, and we used to use characters and this and that, and we used to use comic characters to explain what we're trying to accomplish in our show, and then of course naturally we bring on people like Len Wein and Mark Wolfman, Christy Marks. That was my group of writers that really helped us, fomented. We even brought, actually, you'll appreciate this, Jeff. We brought in DC Fontana to do an episode.
No kidding.
Yeah. I worked with DC Fontana. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah. That's also just one of those things. That's a name that just meant something to me.
Sure.
Growing up.
Absolutely.
So it was fun to work with her. Yeah.
To me, it's like the fact my pilot. We're developing it with Roddenberry. I mean, listen, I know it's not Gene, but it's still what he started.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get that.
So would you get back into animation?
Oddly enough, that's where my interest. If I could be perfectly honest, my true love is animation, even more so than comics. Animation was my love. Comics was my hobby that became my job. But animations, I spent. When I broke into TV. Now we're getting old. 1981. I started working at CBS in 1981 with the goal to work in animation, and I had the opportunity, the choice. I had my TV version of Sophie's Choice. I had a job offer at CBS as a page that paid, and I had a job offer on a show called Pinwheel, which I don't know if any people know what Pinwheel is. The show called Pinwheel, unpaid, right? And it was a children's show, Pinwheel. And I went with CBS because I wanted to get paid. Naturally, Pinwheel became the cornerstone for Nickelodeon. It was one of the launch shows for Nickelodeon. So theoretically, if I had gone the Pinwheel route, I would have been part of the Nickelodeon machine getting in the door, and I might have got into my animation career a lot sooner. But in reality, as a kid, through all the time, I've always wanted to write. That was always my interest. I've always been writing, not selling, but writing. And the CBS thing was a great path and took me to so many great places. And then ultimately to ABC, and then ultimately into ABC Children's Television. And then I finally made it to where I wanted to be there. And then as soon as I got to ABC Television, Disney buys ABC, shuts down the department, and I got laid off.
Oh
yeah.
Oh my God.
So within a year and a half of me getting there, after spending 11 years trying to get there, in a year and a half, I got laid off. So the joke is that the folks at Mainframe, we became friends working on Reboot. I was the executive on Reboot. and they asked me if I wanted to join the show because they got financing out of Canada. So I became their story editor, and from there I became the development exec and things like that, and opened up their offices in LA. And I was in animation, and then it was exhausting, and it was West Coast, and I wanted to get back on the East. Ironically, I wanted to get back on the East Coast, and then I had a mutual friend of mine set up a meeting with. I say it's a meeting. It's actually a blind date with Paul Levitz. I met Paul Levitz for dinner, and that started the ball rolling with DC, and I was there for almost 20 years. Go figure. Yeah.
Wow.
You
20
think
years.
I think
20 years.
18,
Yeah,
18 plus. Yeah. Crazy.
It's crazy.
okay. Now you said that your animation's your first love, but clearly you jumped at the chance to do Nightwing.
Yes, I did. Look, I say animation my first love because I never thought I'd work in comics. Because theoretically, I'm going to say theoretically now, and some people might agree with me. I was grossly unqualified for the job joining into comics. I had worked mostly TV. I stepped into a publishing position with very limited publishing experience and knowledge. I had done some writing peripherally around comics, but not anything on the mainstream. Although Jimmy and I were working on Superboy at the time I was interviewing for my job at DC. So as the story goes, Jimmy's bristling. He's having a little bit of headbutting experience with the editor, and he wants to really bring push forward a lot of ideas. And I kept on saying, I can't explain why, but can we keep it quiet for a little bit longer? And meanwhile, I couldn't explain to him that I was interviewing at DC for a job, and then ultimately I got the job into the area, and and then it was from there. But if you go to 10-year-old Dan DiDio, 10-year-old Dan DiDio wanted to be two things. He wanted to be a television programmer, and he wanted to be editor-in-chief of a comic book company.
Oh, really?
I got to do the two things 10-year-old Dan wanted to do. So, that's not many people get a chance to say that.
That's pretty great, man. I know.
Because the other one was astronaut, and I'd get claustrophobic. I couldn't do the capsule thing. So the other two worked out really good.
I think they did.
Yeah,
I think they did. So I've got a couple other questions I know about you guys, but I wanted to ask. I know you've done one novel. Are you doing a second one?
I actually started on a second one, and then I put together a couple of projects. I was putting together. I was going to put together for Frank Miller Presents. I actually wound up building them out as pitches for new animated series. So I'm actually in the process of taking those out right now. Animation's in a very tough. You talk about tough situations. Animation's in a tough situation right now. There's a lot of ambivalence in where the future of animation is at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And you talk to a lot of animation writers. There's a lot of people struggling at this moment, and the market is tight. But I figured I got a couple of ideas that if they could work in different formats. I'd like to start with animation. If they don't work, fine. I mean, my first novel, Hide or Seek, started as a Netflix pitch. I was requested to bring a project into Netflix to pitch them a superhero project. And I was working with a producer, and we built the project. Kenneth Ruckford came in, did some beautiful designs, who, if you want to talk about talent, before I love working with Kenneth Ruckford, superstar.
Yeah, man.
Yep. Superstar. But anyway, moving ahead. So I brought we went and brought the pitch to Netflix the day after Jupiter's Legacy was canceled.
Oh, wow.
I get to tell the story now. So we go in to do this pitch that they requested. We built within a 3 to 4 week period, put the whole thing together. And actually, I felt really confident about it. And I brought the pitch in, and the executive at Netflix says to me, we're not really looking for superheroes anymore, but do you have anything with like reality style shows with kids on motorbikes on the beach? And, like where they sit around bonfires and talk about slice of life things while they're riding motocross and things like that. And I just remember looking at the producer going, what just happened? And it was just one of those weird moments where I guess they were trying to figure something out. But I had fallen in love with what I created. What we created, and when the opportunity come to do a novel, I decided to adapt that. But the hard part was I didn't know how to write novels, and I brought a couple of folks in to give me help on that, help me lay that out, and which was usually beneficial because when you're writing, I wrote for animation, I wrote for comics, and there's this certain, they're contiguous. They sort of work together, like they work next to each other.
Yeah.
Novels, completely different.
Yeah.
Pacing, chapter breaks, storytelling, and it's interesting. The most interesting thing is when you're writing animation or comics, when you do character scene descriptions, you're doing it in a way to describe it for somebody else to interpret it.
Yes.
You're ready for a novel, the interpreter is the reader. So
Yeah.
you have to make it entertaining.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing for me, is to find a way to do things that I was creating as descriptive for so long and make it become entertaining. So stuff, just different things.
Yeah, those are really great points.
Do
Do you think you'll get to a second one, or do you think that's
I hope so. I hope so. And we'll see what happens. If this stuff doesn't work, then we're on to the next thing. The goal is to constantly try to challenge yourself and do something else. And that's the fun part, And I have some good people I'm working with on the book side, agents wise, and they've been very beneficial in helping direct me on how to make that work. And I've been completely negligent in turning things in. So it's been a bit of a one-way relationship so far. I'm hoping to make it two-way again.
Yeah, I know that.
I gotta tell you, Dan, I've got this thing keeps running through my mind. You walk 5 miles a day recording your ideas. So are people like suspicious? Like, why is this guy walking 5 miles every day talking to himself? Like, are you becoming a local lore?
I don't know. They know me in my neighborhood, that's for sure. But I do. There's this golf course right by the house, and I walk around this golf course. So between there's not many people. There's a few dog walkers. The golfers they don't listen to me. And the best part about it, even if I don't get anything good out of what I say, I find an errant golf ball every once in a while for a collection that I'm building. So it's not a complete waste of time.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
One thing I want to throw in, and Nile, if you can put this in the description after we're done. I always try and get people to go to comic shops. I'm not looking for Gemstone to sell stuff directly, but we are in an era where some people aren't near comic shops. So we'll put the link in for Gemstone to be able to get the Svengoolie book there. I would urge people to go to their local comic shops because we charge shipping and everything else like that. It's no free shipping or anything like that. It's just an alternative rather than not getting it.
Oh, listen, and I think a lot of people. This one, I can almost guarantee people will go if they're a fan of the show. They're going to go to a comic shop. They go to a bookstore. They go to some place where they think they can find something like this, and we'll make sure we point them in the right direction. And that's why I hope the retailers are aware of that. And so these people call, they have product.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I can say, like I said, final order cutoff is Monday. It gives people several days to call their retailer, tell them they want this, and not take no for an answer. Yeah. And because they can still get it. And it's anybody that likes Svengoolie is going to love this book.
Yeah, and I know it just as a fact. I've seen it firsthand at the shows and also at the stores when we did the store signings. There is an extraordinarily loyal fan base out there, and when I do conventions too, the Svengoolie fans find me out because they know I was associated with the book, so that's a lot of fun.
And I got to say, having seen this, we've seen Ben the Overstreet guy. There's definitely back issue traction on that first one.
Yeah, so, the DC giveaway book it's a find, that's for sure.
That's phenomenal. I hadn't checked that one out, but that's great.
Yeah.
So you've got animation and you've got animation in your bones. You got a couple projects going. Anything else comic wise you haven't announced that you can share? Or
not really. I mean, to tell you the truth, I had fun. I had fun with the Frank Miller Presents stuff was the perfect thing to do coming out of DC. It was working with Frank and with the hours that we spent together, it's every comic fan's dream, to be honest with you. But we're having fun and we're talking things through. It was fun working for what we did. So I did the books there. I did a series there, and I did the short story for Godzilla, part of Godzilla's 70th anniversary. Thank you, Jamie Rich, for that one. Or else I probably would have hunted him down if I wasn't part of it. So he saved himself a lot of sleepless nights. which was great. And even better, I got a chance to work with Joel Jones, which knocked it out of the park for me. Just knocked it out of the park. That was another dream come true.
Sure.
I just love Joel's stuff to death. And to hear what she was doing Godzilla, I was like, oh, this is so awesome.
Yeah, she's
and
phenomenal.
in Nightwing, I worked with Maria Sinopo, which is spectacular. She's been spectacular. I'm having a blast with people, and so I'm not. The thing is, I'm not out there looking. I'm just kind of doing right now.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask one. I'm going to ask one fanboy question.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, I think somebody in the chat asked the same thing. Do you think we'll get? Is it going to work out that we can get a collection of Ancient Enemies?
Maybe. I'm hoping so. Yeah, I've got all the books. I'm hoping to do it. I figured out how to cut it because it's a large volume. It's there are over 6 oversized books, 4 one-shots, and a preview. So there's a lot of material in there. Probably works as 2 collections. I'm thinking it through. To tell you the truth, I haven't focused on it. I'll be honest. I just haven't. We've been trying to get this Svengoolie book out. Now it's done. I can start to see the world again.
And since I've been the one pestering you, I'll take the rap for that. But yeah. And like I said, as a fan, I thought that was I'm real interested in universe growing foundational ideas. You started with a really great one in the Frank Miller Presents number 0 or whatever it was called. The preview book, and it just went from there, man.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about Ancient Enemies, and I bring in a little bit of that to Defenders of the Earth too. It's a dystopic future that looks very nice.
Yeah.
We've seen all these burnt out, destroyed worlds. What if the dystopic future looks good and it's actually good for you or seems good for you? What do you do? Do you fight against it? Do you still rally against it? Do you still rail against it? Do you look like the maniac or the terrorist because you're railing against something that is ultimately bad for people, but they seem to be liking it at the time? There's something interesting about that, because I'm always looking at things, and it's that malaise. It's where you think you see something wrong and nobody else seems to react to it, and you don't understand why. And if you could put a voice to that and an idea to that, and comics are a great way to expand all this stuff and play the allegories and play the mythologies and play the insanity. That's what makes science fiction great. And if you can have a fun do that and entertain it and play it and get a point across. But for me, it gives me a baseline for a story. And I love to explore and go down these different routes. And this is a fun one. You're going to find that, Mandrake is playing to audiences that are staring at phones, and he can't understand why this great magic he's doing, nobody's paying attention because everybody's looking at a phone, and he wants to know why that's more interesting than what he's doing, because it's his ego's driving himself. It's driving his ego crazy that he can't captivate an audience like he used to. And if he thinks is it something broken in him that's uninteresting, or is it something that's broken in the world that's bad, And it's what it is.
Fantastic. And before we get going, there's just a couple super chats here from 200 Watt Studio.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Says Dan, how do you feel about Kirby's 2001 series after the film adaptation? I love it and think it was pure sci-fi and unexpurgated Kirby.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to tell you a secret. I can do the story now. But being at DC, so DC, we have all the stuff that comes from Warner Brothers and from the Turner Library with MGM, and we can use certain things. So we were doing a cover stunt, right? We're doing a cover stunt, and we were doing DC covers in the shape of famous movie posters. And Mark Chiarello ran this like nobody's business. It was one of the most beautiful line of covers we ever did, and these great homage covers to famous movies features our characters. 2001 was one of the covers we can use. So I decided to follow that chain. I said, wait a minute, if I can use 2001 on the covers, does that mean I can reprint 2001 comics? And believe it or not, the answer came back yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
the ones that Marvel did. And then I went down a further rabbit hole. I said, wait a minute.
I see where this is going.
Is in 2001. Does that mean DC can do Machine Man? which sent a lot of letters back and forth. Anyway, so we never wanted to work here, but it was one of those things I always wanted to collect. It is some of his best work.
Yeah.
The argument always at DC for Jack Kirby's time at DC is the argument is always that his best work, strangely in a lot of people's minds, there was The Losers, not any of the Fourth World material, but The Losers, because it was the most personal story to him, telling the stories of his time in World War II. And they felt that he really got his own personality, his voice across, and a message across in those stories, even more so with things than the New God story. So a lot of people felt The Losers was his best thing, strangely. Of course, I loved Mr. Miracle, and Commandy, naturally, and Demon, and OMAC. I could do the whole list. So there was no bad book that he did at DC, but a lot of people internally thought that The Losers was his best signature piece for.
That's a really interesting assertion, and it's hard to argue with.
Yeah.
Dan, how do you feel? I'm sorry, from 200 Watch Studio.
Yeah, he's got like 2 more.
Yeah.
So, did you read the short-lived Marvel series of Defenders of the Earth?
Oh hell yeah, I did. Of course I did. Mainly because the first issue was written by Stan Lee and Bob Harris. To which I called Bob Harris and said, "Hey Bob, you want to give me some insight onto Defenders of the Earth?" He goes, "Why?" And I go, "Well, you wrote the first issue with Stan Lee." He goes, "I did." So
that book was close to his
I hope
heart.
I have fonder memories of my Defenders than he had of his.
All right, and last one from 200 Watch Studios. Dan, did you get any inspiration from Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson's Flash Gordon?
No, I actually have this. Honestly, I've seen this stuff. I've never read it in length. I got a lot of the Alex Raymond stuff in my house. My sister had this big oversized Flash Gordon book that I still have to this day. And that was my base for Flash Gordon was the early material from Raymond. That's what I've got. And one of the writers of the Phantom in Australia, he gave me a copy of a Phantom collection. And that was my Phantom material. And then Mandrake, I just cobbled through some material to find that. But you know what? Now that I'm doing this, and you know what? I'm always looking for stuff to buy. You know, I'm one of those guys. I'm always looking for stuff to read and buy. You know, and I've gotten to this weird gold key sensibility lately. I'm reading Dr. Spectre is now my new drug. I don't know why I don't know why, but it is. But that could be something to look for. You know, I'm just got to see if it's ever been collected. I'm sure it's been collected somewhere. I got to find the book. You know,
very cool.
I should. Archie Goodwin stuff is always good. You're never disappointed. I never realized Archie Goodwin was the guy for Creepy and Eerie. Speaking of anthologies, you know, and he was the one, and him and Billy Graham. Those are the guys that really steered those early days of Creepy and Eerie. And then those are the books. Those are the ones
channeling a lot of the old EC guys.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That was my introduction to EC. You know,
not only giving those guys work, getting great work out of it.
Yeah, spectacular, amazing.
And you know, truthfully, it's so funny when you talk about Creepy and Eerie. I have done panels on this. That if you take, like, I was a Romita Spider-Man guy.
Right.
I loved Ditko on Doctor Strange. Wasn't a Ditko fan on that until I saw his Creepy work.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys who own Creepy, I swear I personally moved that book up, the Steve Ditko collection, up a year so I would stop calling them.
I got that book too. Yeah.
And I always take credit for that. They're good guys, but I think they wanted me to stop calling.
No, I loved all that stuff. I loved, you know, and honestly, I was a Romita Spider-Man guy. My first comic, I think I have a lot of first comics, but the first comic that I remember superhero wise was Amazing Spider-Man 40, Spidey Saves the Day, which is
nice.
Made his second issue. And
good one.
Huge Green Goblin fan.
Yeah.
From the cartoon.
Good one.
Yeah.
Hey Dan, I got a question. I got a question to ask you. Going back with all these nostalgic characters that we're talking about from the 30s and all, how do you feel and what do you think will happen once these characters start slipping into the public domain?
I think public domain's overrated. I hate to say it. just because everybody can do it doesn't mean they should do it.
Right.
That's the first one. Second one, only portions of the character are in public domain, so you have to really you're threading a needle on a lot of these things and what you can and can't do. It's not like the whole library opens up automatically. It's very particular pieces that come out at certain times, and these things go into public domain incrementally, not all at one big jump. So I think there's a lot of people that are going to rush to it, and then think they could do something with it, and then just realize there's nothing really there. You know what I mean? In order for these characters to really work, you really have to have a clear, concise understanding, full sense of the richness of the mythology. And the rights holders are the ones that are able to do that. Sooner or later, it just becomes about a name more so than a concept or an idea. And for me, I still believe let's move on. New stuff, new. You know, we got this entire generation that had so much great new stuff, and we're not letting new generations get their own new stuff. We keep on throwing our old stuff back at them because we want them to be as excited about it as we are, you know? And I think, you know, we should be creating new things, you know, and getting new people excited and new things going on. And it's great to have these things as an entry point. It's great as a way to be in. I mean, if let's look at, we talk about this with Shooter and Valiant, which I think is one of the most interesting rollouts of a company. He uses recognizable name characters that had pre-existing history to launch a company, but he builds a whole new world around it. And through those characters, we're introduced to all the new material, and that's the right way to go. And we should be doing new. And if I use a public domain character implanted in a book where I'm trying to introduce 5 new characters to get people excited about it, that's the right way to use public domain.
That's
not just to tell that story. Not to tell that one story from 1929 that I feel they missed. You know, I had a writer once come to me just wanting to tell a story that was a missing piece of a Justice Society from the 40s. And I'm like, I don't need that story. I need the stuff that's going to move me forward, not fill in the past. You know? Yeah. And we got to be looking forward and finding ways to grab people's attention, because nostalgia is leading too much. And nostalgia is a slippery slope. It forces you to get slower to slower because there's so much material in the past. It diffuses the audience in so many different ways and so many different places. And what we really need is to create new light stars for people to follow and to go forward with rather than look back.
I think that's absolutely true. When I thought about that a lot when the Rocketeer movie came out, because, you know, even in those days, a Batman movie had 50 years of baggage.
Yeah.
Story wise, Rocketeer had 5 issues.
Yep.
You know, so a lot more open. You got a super chat there, Nile.
Yep. Then we got one more super chat here. Maybe it's from Aaron Sleeper. Maybe I missed it earlier. What do you think about the Phantom movie? I really enjoyed the noir feel of it all.
Oh, listen, I love the Phantom movie. I love the Phantom movie, and I actually like the Shadow movie too, to be honest with you. They were pure summer popcorn is all they should have been. That's all they were supposed to be. Just big, noisy, crazy adventures with these characters with ridiculous situations and all that. I think that's what was fun about them, you know, and I thought Billy Zane was great in the role.
Yeah, he was. I love it.
Yeah. He played a great Phantom. You know, and was it Treat Williams is the bad guy? You know, and you have Catherine Zeta-Jones. You have a couple of great, a lot of fun actors in that. And so, I mean, they did it all right, and they did it the best way they could. And I think that's a good thing. And I find that movie extraordinarily enjoyable. Like, you know, but again, like I said, if you're going with that preconceived notion that everybody has this deep memory of this, it's not really as deep here in the U.S. as it is outside of the U.S.
The thing about all these movies, with whether they've got a long history or a short history, Rosina frequently reminds me, not everybody's a comic book fan. It still has to work as a movie.
Yeah. Always. And I say that to people all the time. You got to understand, when people get upset about their comic not being translated literally to the screen, you're working in different mediums. There's different ways of consuming, you know, and with film and TV, the film and TV pace the storytelling. When you're reading a comic or a book, you're pacing the storytelling. 2 different things. So you have to be able to work to your medium and you have to understand what works best in your medium rather than trying to do these literal translations. You got to play to the strengths of your medium as well as the strengths of your characters and stories.
Excellent.
That is absolutely true.
Well said, Mr. DiDio. All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. We've had you on for almost an hour and a half now.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that. It's way past my bedtime, boys.
Thank you.
Beginning, he's like, guys, don't waste my time. Let's make this quick. And now he's like, look how much fun I had.
Yeah, you know what? Once you get chatting about comics and things like that, it's very easy to lose track of time.
Yeah.
You know, even without a pipe. If I had a pipe, I probably could do 2-3 hours of this easy.
There you go. And
Billy, what shirt are you wearing?
I'm wearing a Pop XP
Oh my
shirt.
gosh, me too.
Wow.
Oh,
That is
wow.
weird.
What up?
Are we twinning?
Where's ours?
I know,
So
right?
weird.
Wow, talk about coincidence.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Hey,
so
Dan. Any upcoming appearances? I know you've been doing some store signings. Anything?
You know,
Adventures?
nah, not really. I got, can I say something? When I was doing the Frank Miller Presents stuff, it was hard to sell books. I'll be honest with you. So one of my thoughts was to do as many conventions as possible and go out there and hand selling, make people aware of this. Because even with Frank's name recognition, you had to go out there, pound that pavement. You know what it's like, Billy. I watch you every year. Doing it and just doing it. You can't, and you can't let up, right?
Yeah.
You can't let up. So when that happened, I did it. And then when that went away, I had some convention appearance set up, and I sort of just canceled them. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I didn't know what to talk about. I didn't know what I was doing there. I didn't have that same thing because I was doing portfolio reviews. I was looking for people. Actually, when I did Frank Miller Presents, I did a bunch of portfolio reviews and wound up hiring about 4 to 6 people out of my portfolio reviews. When I hired people in Mexico and in Chicago and South Africa, I was bringing people in from different places. And that was great. And I enjoyed that aspect of it. But just to go out there and to sell my wares, I don't have that portfolio. I can't stand still that long. I need to walk around. Everybody knows this. They know me. I can't stand at a single place for that period of time. And I pretty much canceled the shows. It's a couple of things that I'm really trying to focus on and get done, and which is going to take me through to the end of the year. And then after that, we'll see what the new year brings. What doesn't bring. The big part for me is the most important thing I've got going on right now is 5 grandkids.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's a time consumer. That's my travel. I go up to the New Jersey area, see my grandkids, and they're ages 6, to 1.5.
Nice.
And they're out there having a blast. First one's hitting kindergarten this year, a couple in pre-K. That's if you want to talk priorities, that's the priority. And then all the other stuff just fills in the time in between the visits. And and that's the way it's going to be. It works out really good. I'm really happy with it.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
Phenomenal.
Thank you, Dan. As always, it's a privilege having you on. Appreciate it. Love your enthusiasm. And thanks for all that you've done for me and my family. We really
don't worry, man. It's great. Jeff, it's been a blast working with you on the Svengoolie stuff. I couldn't have a better partner on that.
I really appreciate that. It's like really fast reaction. I review the first issue and publish the second one. That's pretty freaking great, man.
That's awesome. That's great stuff, man. Good team.
Yeah.
And now, always a pleasure. You know that.
Yes, as always. But I want to thank you again for coming on. This was great to chat with you and to catch up and talk about these great books. And I look forward to some more of the Defenders of the Earth. You left such a good ending in that first issue.
I believe in cliffhangers. I try to give you a cliffhanger every book. There's
a good, solid, traditional cliffhanger. And just that page is just beautiful.
Yeah. Next one's fun too. I'm having I'm having a lot of fun with the Phantom. I know the strength of that character, and it's important to try to bring that to the light. Like I said, the Flash character with Jeremy Adams' book is in great hands. So I realize that, so I get to use Flash, but the reality is I really want to build up Phantom and Mandrake and Lothar to make them these characters that we know they can be, and which is kind of fun, and that's the good part of the book.
Awesome. All right. Well, Tucci, Mr. JC Vaugn, Mr. Dan DiDio, thank you guys so much. Everyone, have a great night. Enjoy your weekend. Buy some comics. And Dan, I think you deserve a little relaxation with all this work you've been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. We're going, well, where are we next? We go, oh, I'm going to go to Disney World. No.
Hang out.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Yes.
You got it. Thanks a lot, guys. Always a
All
pleasure.
right, guys.
All right. Have a good
Night.
night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
See you
Good
now.
night, everybody.
Thanks now. Bye now.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.